Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Jeffrey Epstein Show. I'm your host, Bobbycapucci, and this is Daily Drop number 122. What's going on, everybody? So earlier I told you I was going to give you an update on Santa Fe, so here it is. It's locked and loaded. We leave on the 24th, folks, of this month. So there was a bit of delay, obviously. It ended up being about a month delay. I was originally going to leave on the 20th, but I was contacted by a source, and discussing things with that source, I decided it would be a better idea to wait a little while and get a better idea of the bigger picture of Santa Fe. That way I could arm myself with more knowledge and have a better idea on where to shake the trees. And it looks like my strategy proved correct, because I have gained a lot more knowledge of Santa Fe. I have even gained another couple of people to speak with down there that I would not have had access to previously. I've had somebody who's reached out to me who is from the area, who has some information, according to them, about Jeffrey Epstein and his alleged trafficking ring, and perhaps that trafficking ring operating inside of Santa Fe. Somebody has contacted me with that information, so we'll see. Right? I get down there now on the 24th, and I will be there, and I'll be talking to these sources. I'm heading out to the Zorro Ranch. I'm heading out to the Santa Fe Institute. It's all locked and loaded now, folks. So sorry about the delay. Obviously, I wanted to get out there as soon as possible. I wanted to get my feet on the ground, shake some trees, and see what was going on. But with limited resources, I have to be selective on how I do this. I don't want to waste the limited resources I have and go down there and turn up with bupkis. So I thought it would be prudent. The ranch wasn't going anywhere. It wasn't something that was super time sensitive. So I think doing it this way, having this more planned out and more of a map on what I want to do and who I want to talk with down there, I think it's going to prove even more informative for you folks, and it's going to be even more fruitful for me, because I didn't want to just go down there and spin my wheels and just talk to if I could cultivate more sources than I already had. Of course, that's a better thing for all of us, right? Look, like I said from the very beginning, I don't know what I'm going to learn down there. Chances are I'm not going to learn any kind of, groundbreaking news. But what I do want to do is get down there and see it for myself, see the situation for myself, and talk to these folks who say that they know a little bit about what was going on, and in some cases, a lot about what was going on. So I'm going to get down there, and I'm going to have some face-to-face chats, maybe a couple of lunches, couple of dinners, whatever it may be. And then I'm going to come back, and, like I said, everything's still the same. I'm going to compile a video of the whole trip from the time I leave from my house to the airport, from the airport to the rental car to the hotel, all the way to Zorro Ranch, to the Santa Fe Institute and beyond. And I'm going to do what I always do. I'm going to go and run my fat yap and ask some questions, right? Look, at the end of the day, that's what we all want. We want some questions answered about Zorro Ranch. Why has it not been raided? How many times was Bill Richardson there? Who else was there? Et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of questions that need to be asked. And we already know that Eileen Guggenheim lied about being there. She was caught lying. She lied for years, saying that Maria Farmer was lying about her, when in reality, it was Eileen Guggenheim was lying about Maria Farmer and that situation. And we had the student Ursula come forward, and she corroborated the whole entire thing. And then, of course, Guggenheim backtracked, blah, 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 blah. But it just goes to show you, there are a lot of rocks left to be unturned in New Mexico. And this first trip down there that I'm leaving for on the 24th now is going to, it'll be the beginning of overturning some rocks. And if we establish a foothold there, we get an idea of what's going on. And I think that there's more there to the story, then I will plan a second trip and go back out there and stay for longer. But this first trip is going to be a whirlwind of information. There's, now I have 3 or 4 separate sources that want to talk down there, all the way up to maybe 5 or 6, depending on how things pan out. But definitely 3 or 4 sources that want to talk when I hit the ground. And I've been talking to a source for the last month now about Santa Fe, and they've been providing me some information and some insight that most people would not know. So it's been fruitful. I've been hard at work on Santa Fe. I didn't want to really bring it up and let you guys know what the deal was until I locked in my dates. So here we are. The dates are locked in. I leave on the 24th, exactly 3 weeks from today, folks. I will arrive in Santa Fe, boots on the ground, and we're going to hit the pavement and we're going to hit it running. We're going to see what's up. All right, now, on to what you're all here for, really. Sorry about that little extended monologue. I just wanted to give you guys all a quick update. I've been talking to some of you in emails and letting you know about what the deal was with Santa Fe, but I thought I'd let the audience as a whole know that everything's still cracking off, but with things like this, of course, sometimes there's delays and, we're relying on other people, right? There's no point to go there if there's nobody for me to talk to. So when you're relying on human factors, sometimes things get a little wonky and a little goofy, and I just need to stay flexible with that sort of stuff and make sure I'm doing my due diligence by buying trip protection and, all of that jazz. And, it's a learning curve for me as well, folks, right? This isn't what I, went to school for. This isn't, I'm not a Harvard-trained journalist or anything like that. I'm just a citizen journalist who's pissed off like the rest of you and who has decided that enough is enough. So for me, of course, I'm very excited. I wanted to get out there right away. But when I took a look at the bigger picture and I talked with the sources and I see where we're at now and the information that I have now about Santa Fe, and I'm a lot more comfortable about getting down there and using my time correctly. So remember, I'm going to be doing some live feeds, et cetera, et cetera. So we're going to have all that stuff that we've talked about. All of that's cracking off still. It just took a little bit longer, right? All right. So let's jump into this article from the New York Times today. And it's a bit of a lengthy article. So kick back, get yourself a nice cold beverage, whatever it may be. Headline: Jeffrey Epstein's mystery bank came alive after his death. Southern Country International received millions of dollars from Mr. Epstein's estate in December. And when you click on the link for the New York Times article, and I don't know if it's behind a paywall right now. I don't pay for the New York Times, so I'm able to view this article right now. I don't know if it's you get a certain amount of freebies a month or whatever that may be. But anyway, right now it's not behind a paywall, so you can click on the link and you can check it out. And there's a certificate, Virgin Islands Banking Board Certificate of Licensure. That's the first thing you'll see, and it's about Jeffrey Epstein's bank. So let's hop into the article and see what they have to say about it. This article was written by Matthew Goldstein and Steve Eder, February 4th, 2020. In the years after Jeffrey Epstein registered as a sex offender, he closed his money management firm and started a business to develop algorithms and mine DNA and financial databases. Then he set up a bank. In a banking license application reviewed by the New York Times, Mr. Epstein described himself as one of the investing world's pioneers and said he wanted to pursue the dynamic discipline of international banking. Really? Come on. What he really means by that, okay? Translation: I want to be involved in banking even more so I can siphon off more money, launder more money, and commit even more evil deeds. That's basically what he's saying. Officials in the Virgin Islands, the United States territory where Mr. Epstein set up most of his businesses, approved a license for him in 2014 to run one of the territory's first international banking entities, a specialized bank that can do business only with offshore clients. The approval was unusual given Mr. Epstein's status as a convicted sex offender. See, isn't that nice? Remember what I was telling you guys about the Virgin Islands for the last, 2 weeks now, about how they're trying to get it on both ends of the deal, right? They wet their beak in the original Jeffrey Epstein, reign of terror when they were looking the other way, and now they want to flip it and they want a little piece on the back end as well. So, again, Let's not make pretend that the Virgin Islands or Denise George or any of these people that are involved in this skullduggery down there really care about the survivors, folks, because they do not. Okay? If they did, what they would do is just make sure that these people weren't spending any more money on any sort of stupid upkeep or anything, and make sure all of that money gets frozen, and at the proper time it gets distributed to those who are deemed to be deserving of it. So that would be every single one of these girls that has come forward, in my opinion, okay? The bank, Southern Country International, renewed its license for each of the next 5 years, but it's unclear whether it conducted any business or had any customers. Mr. Epstein, who died while in federal custody last summer following his arrest on sex trafficking charges, does not appear to have done any marketing for the bank or hired much staff. Of course he didn't. Okay, it was a front. This was a front company, no different than, say, a mafia don has a pizza shop. It's the same thing. Another way to clean his money, launder his money. Now, what's next? A car wash like Eisenberg? I mean, come on. It's so transparent what he was doing and what all of his friends do all the time. The bank was created under a territorial law that lacked many of the oversight requirements banks are usually subject to, and its regulatory file is largely empty. A lawyer for Mr. Epstein told officials in the Virgin Islands in 2018 that Southern Country had not commenced operations, and regulators in the territory said they did not exercise oversight of the bank because it did not appear to be doing any business. I find that hard to believe. Not that they weren't doing any business, but that the officials weren't exercising oversight because it wasn't doing any business. More like they got paid off, folks. Do I have any evidence of that? Of course I do not. But we all know that grifting like that is the oldest game in the book for these people. Since even before Tammany Hall, that's been going on here in America. So if you don't think it's happening down in the Virgin Islands, think again. And yet, after Mr. Epstein's death, his estate transferred more than $12 million to Southern Country, according to court documents. On Tuesday, at a court hearing in the Virgin Islands on motions involving Mr. Epstein's estate, a magistrate judge, Carolyn Herman Purcell, questioned the estate's lawyers about the transfers to Southern Country, saying the disclosure was not satisfactory. The judge said she did not know why Southern Country would be receiving checks from the estate. There's no explanation for it, she said. Yeah, there's an explanation for it. They're laundering money. They're putting the money there so they can hide it, so that they don't have to give it to the people who deserve it, okay? And that's what it's all about. That's what these people do all the time. That's their shtick, folks. They're going to make sure that they don't have to pay out anything if they can help it. All right? They don't want to pay out anything. A lawyer for the estate responded that some of the payment had been made in error, but the judge was not satisfied with his response and asked him to follow up with a fuller accounting. The checks listed in the estate's transactions for routine payments such as cable TV bills and phone service for Mr. Epstein's many properties stand out. The list of payments were filed with Judge Herman Purcell, who is overseeing his $635 million estate, including the possible establishment of compensation fund for his victims. Again, folks, why do his properties still need cable? Why do they need TV cable bill and phone service? There should be nobody in those properties. They should be seized, they should be closed, and they should be taped up, okay? Nobody should be in those properties. And these properties that are sitting there should not be siphoning money from the grand total of his estate. That money should be going to the survivors. What in the hell is going on? That Mr. Epstein was able to get a banking license in the first place is unusual. No, it's not. No, it's not, okay? He paid people off in the Virgin Islands. They all knew what he was doing. And now this whole entire fiasco is coming back on them. So Denise George is trying to save face by saying she's going to go after Epstein's estate as well. That's my opinion of the whole situation. But there is no way anybody can tell me that these people, these officials in the Virgin Islands, weren't getting their palms greased. Sorry, that's a bunch of BS. We've seen the evidence of Jeffrey Epstein spreading the wealth around. We've seen it. His 2008 conviction in Florida on a charge of soliciting prostitution from an underage girl required him to register as a sex offender. I hate when they write that. Soliciting prostitution from an underage girl. If you're an underage girl, you cannot be a prostitute. What a ridiculous law that was on Florida's books. Really glad they got rid of that one. Most bank operators doing business in the United States are required to undergo rigorous background checks, and most banking institutions are subject to oversight by the arm of the Treasury that investigates suspicious financial transactions. Neither was required by the Virgin Islands when Mr. Epstein submitted the application in 2013. Again, why do you think that is, folks? Do you think it's just because the Virgin Islands decided, you know what? We're going to let Epstein pass. He's a nice guy. We like his shoes. Or was it that Epstein had been greasing palms, making everybody eat, giving everybody that bag, and they decided, well, look, we're going to keep this gravy train rolling. It's not our kids. What do we care? And that's, you know what, that's the harsh reality of it, folks. I don't mean to be so abrasive with it, but that's the harsh reality, that these people look at it and they say, well, it's not our kids. What the hell do we care? When in reality, any right-thinking human being looks at a situation like this and says to themselves, how could you ever enable somebody like Jeffrey Epstein? But we all know in politics and in this kind of walk of life, money talks, folks. Money talks, and it's the be-all, end-all to these evil people. The territory had passed its international banking entity law a year earlier in hopes of enticing investment from overseas. It modeled its law on that of Puerto Rico, where international banking entities have existed for 3 decades. Such organizations are attractive to offshore investors because the banks are able to offer more favorable tax treatment than the investors' own countries can. In return, the territories expect residents to manage the banks even though they cannot use the bank's services. Crazy. So all of these loopholes are crazy. Like I was saying earlier about the Virgin Islands. Look, I'm obviously not an expert on law, and certainly no expert on law in the Virgin Islands. But if you don't think the politicians are corrupt as hell down there, and if you don't think they're grifting like an MF, you have another thing coming, okay? They create all these loopholes, and when was anybody going to look at the Virgin Islands besides as a vacation spot until this Jeffrey Epstein stuff popped up? These guys were escaping all sorts of scrutiny because of Jeffrey Epstein. Because they were off the radar. Then now Epstein, well, they're smack dab in the middle of everybody's radar at this point now, right? These specialized banks have drawn scrutiny because of their potential for abuse, including money laundering. Again, folks, that's very important. Let's remember that, money laundering, okay? So now we know that he laundered money. We know that he transported girls and children across state lines for trafficking. We know that. We know that he threatened people. We know that he was involved in an ongoing criminal conspiracy. And we know that because we have the evidence of all of this. And that's just four quick things right off the top of my head that he was definitely involved in. All right? And all 4 of those things can get you slapped with RICO. How wasn't this man, and how aren't his associates slapped with RICO? I just don't understand it. It's beyond me. It is absolutely beyond me, folks. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York describes international bank entities in the Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico as high-risk institutions. Last year, it temporarily suspended applications for them to obtain financial services from the Fed until it can issue stricter rules for them. Look, I'm not even going to begin to act like I understand the nuances of these financial institutions and these high-risk financial institutions, because I do not. So I'm not going to run my fat yap too much about those, but it strikes me as odd that the Federal Reserve would even though they slap them with a high-risk institution, they let them go into business. Why would you even let a place like this go into business? Meanwhile, you're sending, Wesley Snipes to jail for tax evasion. It's such a joke. The two-tier justice system in this country is such a joke, folks. Mr. Epstein was carefully evasive in answering a question on the application that was meant to reveal information about an applicant's criminal record. His response mentioned his guilty plea to state charges in Florida, but it played down the other elements of the case. For a relatively brief period in what was otherwise been a productive and accomplished life, the application said, Mr. Epstein did face some legal difficulties relating to matters alleged to have taken place 7 years ago. The application noted that a federal investigation had been discontinued. Oh yeah, obviously it was discontinued, huh? You thought it was discontinued, but guess what? This was not going to go away. This was not going to be swept under the carpet this time. But that answer was misleading, said Richard Scott Carnell, a former Assistant Secretary for Financial Institutions at the Treasury Department. The application did not reflect that Mr. Epstein's plea deal included an agreement with federal prosecutors who promised not to bring their own charges. The agreement acknowledged that federal authorities had compiled a long list of other possible underage victims. I don't even understand, any Joe Schmo with computer access can Google Jeffrey Epstein and seen what he was guilty of. For them to be like, well, he didn't declare that in his application, and nobody's checking these people, so anybody can just go get some high risk bank in the Virgin Islands. Anybody at all? How about some Al Qaeda member or some cartel member? I don't even understand what any of this means, right? Well, how's that even possible? Why is the Federal Reserve even granting these sort of institutions the ability to operate? Crazy. Bank regulators expect applicants to be candid, said Mr. Carnell, now an associate professor at Fordham Law School. You'd never suspect that there was a non-prosecution agreement. As a bank regulator, I'd be outraged to learn that an applicant had misled me in that way. Here's an idea, and I know that this is going to be a novel idea. All right. How about if you're working with people that have that kind of money and you're getting into business with them? It might be a good idea to do a basic Google search on them or a DuckDuckGo search on them. Probably not the worst idea in the world, okay? For all of these people to use that as an excuse, oh, I had no idea who this man was, or we had no idea who he was when we gave him this banking license. That's BS. Of course you knew who he was. Would you live under a rock? In his application, Mr. Epstein listed as references James E. Staley, the chief executive of Barclays, who had cultivated a relationship with Mr. Epstein while at J.P. Morgan Chase. Another reference was Andrew Farkas, a New York real estate tycoon and co-owner of a marina and office complex on St. Thomas with Mr. Epstein. Spokesmen for both men said they had been unaware they were listed as references, along with J.P. Morgan and First Bank, a Puerto Rico-based lender with branches in the Virgin Islands that long held some of Mr. Epstein's accounts. Of course they didn't know. Nobody ever knows anything when it has to do with Jeffrey Epstein, do they, folks? See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil. That's what they all look like. Those monkeys, I hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil. And that is all of these people. The application was submitted by Erica A. Kellerhalls, a longtime tax lawyer for Mr. Epstein in the Virgin Islands. She did not return requests for comment. Of course not. She's going to the mattresses too, right? She's hiding out. She's definitely bunkering in. She doesn't want to answer any questions about this. But guess what? Questions are coming your way. Southern Country had not commenced doing business as of April 2018, according to correspondence between Mrs. Kellerhalls and the Territory Banking Department. Regulators said the bank was a self-reporting company and did not require additional regulatory oversight if it was not operational. Well, maybe you guys should change that in the future, huh? Well, I mean, just leave them to their own devices. No oversight's needed. Let them launder money. Let them do whatever they want. Because guess what? It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. It's a free-for-all if you have this kind of money. You can steal, you can grift, you can lie, you can cheat, you can start endless wars, and obviously you can have trafficking operations under everybody's nose. And that's okay. No big deal. But court documents show Southern Country was active for some of last year. Records filed by the estate on Friday indicate that Southern Country had $693,157 in assets when Mr. Epstein died on August 10th. Then, in mid-December, the estate transferred $15.5 million to Southern Country in 2 checks. Southern Country sent back $2.6 million, leaving the total it received at $12.9 million. The documents filed by the estate do not give a reason for the transfers. Chances are they were laundering money. That's my guess, okay? Again, look, I have no evidence to prove that, but at this point, do you trust anything that has to do with Jeffrey Epstein, his finances, his executors, or anything around this whole entire sordid ordeal in the Virgin Islands? I certainly do not. It's also not clear what Southern Country did with that money. 2 weeks later, the year-end value of Southern Country's assets was $499,759, according to the estate's filings. The estate has told officials in the Virgin Islands that it does not intend to renew the bank's license again. Oh, that's nice of them. We're not going to renew it again. We've already, stole as much as we possibly could, and we've already washed a ton of money here, so no big deal. We don't need that license. Go ahead, you can take it. Around the time the territory granted Mr. Epstein his banking license, it also gave a lucrative tax break to Southern Trust, a company Mr. Epstein said was developing sophisticated algorithms to mine DNA and financial databases. The tax break came from the territory's Economic Development Authority, which was approved by the territory's former governor, John DeJohn Jr., while his wife Cecile worked for Mr. Epstein. Isn't that nice, folks? You see what I mean here? Do you understand now what I'm talking about? How the Virgin Islands is trying to get paid on this on both ends of the deal? All right, you had John DeJong, who was the governor, and his wife Cecile, who had worked for Mr. Epstein, and he's the one who approved all of this nonsense, okay? So, come on. For Denise George to be going after the estate here, why don't you go after the governor and all the other politicians that look the other way or accepted money from Jeffrey Epstein? When is it going to be their time to stand to face justice? Never, right? It's never their time. It's always just the scapegoats. It's always just the low-hanging fruit. The tax break granted in 2013 was a boon for Mr. Epstein. Southern Trust generated about $300 million in profit in 6 years, and he paid an effective tax rate of about 3.9%. If that doesn't make you sick, folks, I don't know what will. Add that on to all the other nonsense that this guy was involved in, and he was grifting all of this money by hardly paying any taxes. And the government officials of the Virgin Islands have the audacity to try and go after his estate now when they were cutting him this sweetheart of a deal. Why didn't you tax the shit out of him then? If he was such a bad guy and you all knew what he was, why didn't you tax the shit out of him then? Of course you didn't tax him then because you, personally, were being enriched by it. The source of Southern Trust revenue is not clear. The bare-bones corporate filings made by the company in the Virgin Islands do not list any clients. Again, another theme of Jeffrey Epstein. One client, hardly any clients, and just another way for him to pack away the fazools, launder that money, and commit all sorts of crimes that should be slapped with RICO. Although the Virgin Islands was long a place where Mr. Epstein got his way, it has lately cast itself as one of his victims. In a lawsuit last month, the Attorney General of the Virgin Islands, Denise M. George, said Mr. Epstein had sullied the territory's reputation with his conduct. She sued Mr. Epstein's estate, seeking to seize his private islands and dissolve what she said were shell companies acting as fronts for his sex trafficking enterprise. The suit seeks to intervene in the administration of Mr. Epstein's will to safeguard assets for dozens of his victims, claiming that co-executors may have a conflict of interest because they were officers in many of Mr. Epstein's companies, including Southern Country and Southern Trust. The co-executors, Darren Indike and Richard Kahn, did not answer requests for comment. Judge Herman Purcell, the magistrate judge overseeing the administration of Mr. Epstein's will in the Virgin Islands, heard arguments on the Attorney General's request at the hearing on Tuesday. The judge said she would issue a ruling at a later date. All right, folks. Well, this goes into what we talked about last night, how the estate was worth more than we knew, how the estate had made $80 million in his death, and I told you that there was a hearing today. So I thought it would be good to jump in and we'll have a full accounting of what went on. And now we know that the judge will be rendering the decision later on in the future. But you understand now, I'm sure you guys all understand, right? The Virgin Islands is acting like a victim here, when in reality the Virgin Islands was an enabler, okay? The Virgin Islands as a territory enabled Jeffrey Epstein's behavior. They accepted gifts from him, they accepted money from him, and they knew exactly what he was. So forgive me if I don't cry any crocodile tears for the Virgin Islands. All right, folks, if you'd like to contact me, you can do that at bobbycapucci@protonmail.com. That's BOBBYCAPUCCI at protonmail.com. Also, if you would like to help support the podcast, you can do that by clicking on the GoFundMe link inside of the description box. All right, everybody, I will be back tomorrow morning with the morning update. I hope you all have a fantastic night, and I will talk to you then.